morning, Dog Nation. I am Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And I don't know about you, but today feels like a very, very good day to earn your way into the College World Series, something the Diamond Dawgs are going to try to do later on this evening. Man, we are excited about that, and we are all over that, as you would imagine, on today's show. But in addition to that, this was also a very big weekend for Georgia recruiting there as well. So we have got a lot to do. A couple of great guests are going to help us do it here today. Your presence, of course, is awesome there as well. A lot of fun around the Athens campus here right now. We will attempt to chronicle it all. Glad to have you with us as we get going here. It's DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
So I believe that today is a little bit of a historic day for our program. I was thinking about this. We've been on the air since August of 2015, and this is the biggest non-football day in the history of our show. That we've obviously had some great days to talk about as it relates to Georgia football, and for various reasons, for whatever, we haven't quite had a day like this involving a non-football team. And I'm really, really excited about it. Tonight, Game 3 of the Super Regional in Athens at Foley Field. You know that place is going to be rocking in the venue, out at Kudzu Hill, in the left field lounge. Like, it is going to be a madhouse of epic proportions. And we're just really, really excited about it. So a lot of baseball, at least a nice look at all of that here today. But I do have to take care of some business before we get to the big game here tonight. Georgia is rolling in recruiting right now, and it's doing so in fantastic fashion, kind of accelerating some timelines and really kind of taking a scorched earth approach to its would-be recruiting rivals, and I think this is a great thing to see. So I know a lot of attention is going to be between the white lines for baseball here tonight, but you cannot miss what is happening for Georgia recruiting here at the moment, too. In fact, let me give you two really good pieces of great news for UGA recruiting right off the top of the show, and then we'll look at everything else going on around the Dogs after that. Let me start with this. Georgia got a commitment yesterday evening from a very impressive defensive line commit. His name is Christian Garrett. He's out of Prince Avenue Christian right there in Bogart, Georgia, essentially almost as close to the UGA campus as any recruit and commit could eventually be. Big deal here. You're talking about somebody that's like right there within the cusp of being kind of a top 100 recruit. You know, this is what a top 15-ish overall defensive line prospect in the country there as well. Jeff Sintel caught up with Garrett last night about the Georgia commitment, and there are a couple of things that Garrett says that I think are worth your attention. So I want to read this from Jeff's story at DawgNation.com about Garrett, who kind of accelerated his commitment timeline after taking the official visit to Georgia this weekend and pulled the trigger on that commitment last night. The first quote is this: Garrett telling Jeff at DawgNation.com that Georgia's got everything I want as a player and everything me and my family want as a player. I always wanted to go there. It's been a childhood dream. This has been my favorite team since childhood. You can't go wrong with it. There's a phrase in marketing around the idea of whatever sector you're in, whatever kind of business industry you're in, that you want to become the obvious and irresistible choice. You want to eliminate any objections to why someone should use your product or use your service. To become obvious and irresistible just sort of makes the consumer decision that much easier. And I couldn't help but think about that when I read what Garrett said there about, well, why wouldn't I go to Georgia? And ultimately, this is why UGA continues to pile on the recruiting success that it's enjoying, is because at a certain point, you're left to say, well, why wouldn't I just go to Georgia? What don't they have? What box don't they check? And in terms of defensive line development, in terms of culture around the program, in terms of, and we, I think, talked about this, was it with Terrence Edwards on Thursday, a place that makes the families feel comfortable and also can feel like a family to the player while he's there. Georgia seems to check that off really, really well. There are a couple of other things that I like about the Garrett commit, and I want to go back to the quote from him in a moment after that. But, you know, as we've talked about, and Jeff Sintel and I talked about this again on Friday, you want to corner the market when it comes to defensive linemen. It's just one of the most important things in recruiting, that you want to have that pipeline of defensive line recruits coming in. And one of the great differentiators for Georgia and anybody that's sort of competing with in recent years has been Georgia's ability to stockpile talent on both lines of scrimmage. And so Garrett perhaps foreshadowing what either other defensive line might also do in this 2025 class, in some cases echoing what some guys have already done prior to that, is just an example that Georgia stays as committed to its line of scrimmage success as possible, in particular on the defensive line. And we've said it plenty of times in the past that on the field for Georgia here in 2024 obviously kind of needs to be a little bit of a bounce-back year for the Georgia defensive line, but you also are thinking about kind of future years too in stockpiling that talent, and that's obviously something that Georgia's able to do right there. This is also kind of a weird thing, but this did sort of pop, into my mind a little bit on the Garrett news there as well. Garrett goes to Prince Avenue Christian, and sort of a small world that sometimes football can be. Garrett's high school coach is Greg Vandegrift. Vandegrift, of course, is the father of Brock Vandegrift, who transferred away from Georgia, and Georgia's going to be facing Brock Vandegrift later on this fall there at Kentucky. It did sort of pop into my mind a little bit that it's kind of nice to know that, fresh off a Brock Vandegrift transfer, which to me is just a business decision for him, and Georgia made its business decision in choosing Carson Beck as the starting quarterback a year ago. Certainly seems like there's no harm, no foul, no hard feelings here. Everybody's sort of, both parties sort of doing what they think was the right thing for them, and, certainly no friction here in terms of another Prince Avenue player coming to UGA. I think that's a really nice thing to see. Obviously, when it comes to the sort of smaller classification programs, Prince Avenue right now is about as talent-rich as anyone. You want to keep a good relationship there, and it seems like even with Brock Vandegrift now playing for Kentucky, that's kind of going to be the case. And so I thought it was kind of nice to – it's one of those things that probably doesn't matter all that much, but it did sort of pop into my head there a little bit. I think there's a lot to like about Garrett as a player. You should go to the story that Jeff wrote at DawgNation.com to sort of see more about that, the evaluation of sort of what he brings to the table as Georgia tries to corner the market on elite defensive linemen here in this 2025 class. In fact, if I can go back to the quote screen we had a moment ago, there was something else that Garrett said that I wanted to read to you here for a moment, because this is going to end up being a little bit of a theme right now. You heard this from Zayden Walker, and now you're hearing this from Christian Garrett. He says, I'm shutting everything down. I felt that I always wanted to go there, meaning Georgia, and they just opened my eyes to a lot more stuff. I just really felt like it was the move, so I just did it. I prayed about it, and I just did it. Well, I say amen to that on that answered prayer. You love to see that. But in all seriousness, the other day, Zayden Walker, commits to Georgia, was supposed to take the official visit to South Carolina, was supposed to take the official visit to Miami. I guess maybe Florida State was a little bit of a factor there too. But after an official visit to Georgia, said, you know what? Not only am I committing to UGA, I'm not allowing myself to be recruited by anybody else. And then now Christian Garrett sort of saying the same thing, because the other big factor here in the Garrett recruitment was Clemson, because a lot of you know the geography here. Up 85, Clemson sits about as close to the Athens area as almost any two schools possibly could. So if you're there around Jefferson, think about Sammy Brown or Bogart, there's a very close pull to Georgia, but Clemson's not that far away. And Clemson needs elite line of scrimmage players. The best of the sort of Brent Venables defensive era, that's kind of a long time ago now, or it starts to feel like a little bit of a long time ago. And so Clemson would have really liked to get its hands on Christian Garrett. But now, not only is Garrett committed to Georgia, but as he says right there, I am now shutting everything down. That is a massive piece of good news for Georgia. But to keep the same theme going here, it is not the only really big piece of good news for these Dogs in the recruiting front here this weekend, because another major name also has announced he is shutting it down. Fresh off an official visit to Georgia this past weekend, I should say a week ago, I'm talking about Elias Williams, the five-star. I guess you'll call him a tight end, but he's really he's like a superhero to me. But wide receiver, tight end, a guy that I don't think has gotten nearly enough attention yet for the sort of space-age type prospect that I believe he has a chance to be. Just really, I would say in like the Darnell Washington mode. Different people are going to have like sort of different, sort of comparisons, I guess. But, a guy that's big enough to be a tight end, athletic enough to be, a true kind of, split-out wide receiver. Like Elias Williams, to me, is a massive deal. And Williams apparently also had a very good official visit to Georgia, about a week ago or so, because Hayes Fawcett from over at On 3, the guy that does all the edits, the little graphics that you see, well, he reported this weekend that Elias Williams has also officially shut down his recruitment, that he's, committed to Georgia, and he also said, I'm locked in, go Dogs. So apparently Williams is also not taking any more visits either. And y'all, I'm telling you, obviously the Christian Garrett decision to commit to Georgia is going to get a lot of attention, but this was the kind of a decision and the kind of announcement from Williams that I believe ought to get a lot of attention there as well. That Georgia right now is just on a really big-time run in recruiting of not just winning with commits, but in this day and age in which there are bids and sort of anything can happen at the last minute, the way in which it's kind of using the quality of these official visits to convince players not to participate in any more recruiting from any other programs, that is just a really big deal for Georgia right now, something that you ought to pay very close attention to. Now, with that said, let me completely shift gears to a totally different topic. Obviously, we rode the roller coaster when it comes to Georgia baseball over the weekend. Saturday could not have gone worse. Sunday could not have gone any better. And now we sit here on a Monday night and we talked about last week, but there is something about the college part of college baseball that's just really fun, and just the sort of wild nature of the games that I think makes it really entertaining for those of us who've liked this sport for a while. And tonight is an example of that. First of all, here's what we know. We're going to do some more on this later on. But the atmosphere in Foley Field tonight is going to be, was it Larry Munson once said, worse than bonkers, or whatever his phrase was? We know that's going to be the case. Inside the venue in there, Foley Field, obviously Kudzu Hill, left field ledge. I mean, it's just going to be just the best and sort of an unbelievably pleasant surprise for this summer, who did not probably have this on our radar. We know that's going to be the case. And we also know anything can happen. I mean, the range of possible outcomes for this game tonight includes every possible final score you could ever imagine. I mean, this could be a replica of Sunday. We hope that it is. This could be, I guess, a replica of Saturday. We hope it's not. This could be anything in between. That is certainly the case. It's just going to be so much fun. And I was thinking about, like when you're sitting around with Georgia fans, maybe you're off the beach together, or you're, hanging out, at a tailgate, something like that. The conversation sometimes comes up of, well, gosh, if you could take a Georgia player from a previous team and put him on this team, who would be the guy that you'd want? That's one of the things that you sometimes do. And in football, that's kind of a fun thing to do. I was thinking about this as it relates to this Georgia baseball team. With the way this team scores runs, with the way this team gets back up off the deck when it's asked to do that, this obviously has the makings of a special team, and its run through the year has clearly shown you that's the case. I was thinking, man, what if you had a Cole Wilcox going tonight, a guy that Georgia had a couple of years ago? What if you had an Emerson Hancock going tonight, a guy that Georgia had, a couple of years ago? If you could go back into the past and grab one of those guys and put him on the mound, no disrespect to the guys who'll be going tonight, of course, but what if you could put up like a true, high draft pick, frontline guy going like that tonight? Obviously, this Georgia team would probably be the favorite to win it all in the College World Series. As it stands right now, I would say tonight's game for both sides going to be more about offense than probably not. I think both these teams are more comfortable with the bats in their hands than they are on the mound. I believe that's probably the case. And to NC State's credit, they've shown some real fight here. I don't expect them to come and lay down and die in a tough atmosphere tonight. I expect Georgia to have to do what it did last Sunday and beating Georgia Tech to advance. If it wants to advance tonight, it's going to have to bring, its sort of top, performance A game there as well. But we have seen Georgia answer this call all season long. Either way, it's really, really fun, and it's really, really exciting. We're going to do more on this. We're going to hear from Wes Johnson here in a second. We're going to talk to Cody Chaffins, our guy who has been there at Foley Field, done some great packages for us on the DawgNation YouTube page. We're going to talk to him a little bit later on. If you want to go back a few months ago, did I have this on my bingo card, as the saying goes, that on a Monday in June we'd be talking about Georgia a game away from the College World Series? No. This was a very pleasant surprise for me based on what my personal outlook was for Wes Johnson his first season at Georgia. So I would say sit back and enjoy it. If you're lucky enough to have tickets for this game, use them well. Be as loud as I know that you will be. I just think it's going to be a blast. I think it's going to be a blast. And Georgia deserves a lot of credit just for getting to this point, especially after what happened on Saturday and how they did that. Wes Johnson had some great insight on all of that. We'll give that to you coming up. But first, let's introduce the rest of the show. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. So happy to have you with us. Whether you're here on video or podcast or the radio, Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, just really, really thankful to have you a part of the program. I mentioned the DawgNation YouTube page a moment ago. Obviously, that's the medium that many of you use to access this show, whether it's on demand or live. But don't forget, there's a lot more going on at the DawgNation YouTube page than just this show. Obviously, we're very proud of our show, but we're also very proud of all the other content that pops up there. So if you've never subscribed to DawgNation on YouTube, this is a great time to do that, to see some of the stuff happening at Foley Field. Really good press conference last night with Wes Johnson, some of the top players after that Georgia win, yesterday afternoon, against NC State. Some great packages that we've kind of put up around that this time of year. There's a lot going on, DawgNation on YouTube, so make sure you check that out. By the way, big thanks to our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia, who make today's show possible. Energy efficient windows and doors. That's what Pella Window and Door of Georgia is all about. And taking the best possible care of your home, of course, that's something you want to do. You want a home to feel good on the inside, look good on the outside. And that is what Pella Window and Door of Georgia is all about there as well. Energy efficient windows and doors. What does that mean? It means the great craftsmanship and the quality, product design that kind of keeps the energy in your house inside where it's supposed to be. That could potentially save you money on some energy bills. Looking good on the outside, which when you increase your curb appeal and when people see that sort of recognized brand leader in this space, they know you're taking quality care of your home, which can improve your resale value. It's just a great investment into what's already perhaps your most important investment, your home, when you install Pella windows and doors. So I think it's time for you to have a conversation with one of those Pella experts. I want you to reach out and see them in their experience center there in Duluth. Let them come out and talk to you in person. It's a no-pressure consultation. It's simply informative. Like, I have grown to respect Pella Window and Door of Georgia, but the Pella experts can tell you even more about it than I can. That's why you want to have that conversation directly with one of them. You can also do it virtually if you'd rather do that too. They want to make it convenient, informative for you to get all the information that you need. There's also great savings right now as well. Between now and June 30th, you can get 15% off a Pella project or get some special financing there as well. So give them a call, 678-638-1429. That's 678-638-1429 or online, pellaofga.com/DawgNation. That's pellaofga.com/DawgNation. Just do me a favor. Tell them the BA from DawgNation Daily sent you, and then they would take good care of you, because I know they will. They've been doing that for a long time. Pella Window and Door of Georgia is viewed to be the best. We're going to talk to Jon Stinchcomb here coming up in just a moment. A lot to do with John. Prior to that, let's go around the doghouse, poured today by our friends at Dr. Pepper. And as I told you, ahead of tonight's game at 7 p.m. between Georgia and NC State with a College World Series berth on the line. By the way, what an interesting thing this is in the fact that this year's College World Series, and I don't know if this has ever happened before, is going to be just two conferences. It's ACC and it's SEC, and that's basically it in this College World Series. And obviously, Georgia trying to kind of wave that flag for our league again tonight there on all of that. But in terms of where Georgia is now, after Saturday's result, I'm sure plenty of Georgia fans could have maybe have been forgiven if they assumed we would not be talking about a Game 3, because obviously the second inning of Saturday's game went about as poorly as any can go. And yet Georgia bounced back very well on Sunday to kind of do its own version of the kind of, whipping that NC State dealt out to Georgia there on Saturday. Wes Johnson, who has been so even-keeled throughout this entire postseason, never too high, never too low, I thought had a great explanation yesterday afternoon for kind of how Georgia was able to kind of bounce back and how they'll use that same mentality as you get ready for tonight. This is what the first-year Georgia baseball coach had to say about all of that yesterday.
Well, I think that's why your message all year has to be it's just a game of baseball. And, emotions can take you in the wrong way a lot of times. And, if we can keep our emotions in check and every day you go to play this game, you understand it's just that game that day. When these games come around, guys don't get sped up. And so my message won't change tomorrow. I was saying, I mean, yes, these guys, I mean, hey, it's another game tomorrow. And you better be locked in from pitch one on both sides of the baseball. You better be focused up. And if we do that, it's going to put us in position to have success. Doesn't mean, doesn't always guarantee that you will, but it's going to put you in position to be in a good position to have success. And that'll be our message again tomorrow, and that'll be our plan.
We've said this before, and it's worth repeating. Baseball is not football. Like Kirby Smart, his message to his team prior to games, the whole, I want you to eat, I want you to want this. Those I'm talking about, like those little videos that kind of sneak out their way on the internet every now and then, or their audio recordings, and Kirby's just peeling the paint off the walls. I think that really, really works for football. I do think there's a fever pitch of emotion in football. You either find that level or you don't. And football asks something of your body that if you can't quite get there emotionally, you're maybe not willing to pay the price that football requires. And so therefore the kind of like blood-curdling, just screams that sometimes Kirby Smart has in some of these great like pregame messages, that's sort of what football requires. I do not believe you can play baseball that way. I just don't. Now, do you want to get motivated and fired up, and do you need to be ready for the intensity? Of course you do. But ultimately, this is a game that's more about how well you can play relaxed. And college baseball is just a really, really weird sport that, Georgia played about as bad Saturday as you can, but there's no difference in losing 2-1 and 16-1. There's just not any difference. There is no penalty for getting blown out. That you simply in that moment have to say, we got to get through this and put ourselves one game away on Monday night. And we got to chew up innings. We just have to reset the clock and be ready to come out here on Sunday to play for a chance at a Monday. That's exactly what Georgia's done. We've said before, we've liked the mindset that Wes Johnson has brought to this team all year long. I wouldn't even begin to make a prediction about tonight. I really wouldn't. But I will say this, that if Georgia is within striking distance at any point in time, they've obviously got the moxie and, of course, the competence with the bats to be able to score enough runs to win this game. Of course they do. And if NC State's not careful, Georgia dials that up early and gets this crowd rocking and rolling. And this one could be over, in the early innings, just given what Georgia can do with the bats. But if for some reason adversity strikes, a team that has come back and struck back and dealt with high-pressure situations and had adverse conditions before this season, I think they're capable of doing that there as well. This is going to be really entertaining. This is, just as we said to start the show, the biggest non-football day in the history of our show, which dates back to August of 2015. So I'm just like you. I'm very, very excited for all of it. Can't wait to see the atmosphere at Foley Field tonight. Cannot wait to see what Georgia baseball has for an encore. And who knows, maybe we're actually talking about these Diamond Dawgs on their way to the College World Series for the first time in a long time. Boy, that'd be a fun story if that were to play out that way. And that is Around the Doghouse, poured today by our friends at Dr. Pepper. And, of course, we love our friends at Dr. Pepper, and we love what Dr. Pepper's got going on here this summer. I've heard this from so many of you. And first of all, we've had some fun lately with the fact that Dr. Pepper business-wise has been doing really well, kind of shooting up the ranks in terms of the soft drink rankings, which we're very, very proud of. Of course, for us, Dr. Pepper is and has always been number one, and perhaps extending that lead even more as they introduce a brand new flavor for the summer. You've heard about the Dr. Pepper Creamy Coconut and Dr. Pepper Creamy Coconut Zero Sugar. This is just sort of a fun thing that Dr. Pepper's done over the course of the last couple of years, taking some time to introduce some creative new flavors, giving people a chance to try something completely different than perhaps anything you've ever enjoyed before. That is what Dr. Pepper's all about. So as you're out there at your local Kroger or wherever you're doing your grocery shopping, pick up some Dr. Pepper Creamy Coconut and some Dr. Pepper Creamy Coconut Zero Sugar today. And it's great to have Dr. Pepper pouring around the doghouse for us. So a lot going on. Later on, Cody Chaffins will help fill in some of the gaps about what we can expect tonight for Georgia against NC State. That'll be a lot of fun. There's news about a couple of former in-state recruits here, or at least one kind of big in-state recruit that I want to talk about later on in terms of some rumors that were out there on that. We'll cover that. Former UGA recruiting targets also in the news as well. So we're going to cover a lot of ground here before we're done. But a Monday for us means the great former Georgia All-American Jon Stinchcomb. Let's talk to him right now here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
We will say hello to Jon Stinchcomb. Always great to have him on the program. A little bit different conversation for us, at least to start things off today, than we're normally used to. John, Athens is a baseball town today, and I love it. I don't believe I'm going to be able to go to the game tonight, but I certainly would like to be there. We've just had, just to be totally frank, we've had a lot going on in our family here this weekend, so I don't believe I'll be able to be there. But, man, I'll be living in spirit with the thousands of folks in the stadium and probably about that many outside the stadium there as well. How much fun is this for you to see what Foley Field has a chance to be tonight and what this Georgia baseball team has a chance to accomplish in Wes Johnson's first season?
It's unreal. I love the energy that surrounds all of Foley Field and just the program in general. I think just to have new life there, to see an opportunity that is realistic come through the pike, and you say, man, we're almost on the verge of a first World Series, College World Series appearance in what's almost a decade. That's hard to believe, and grateful that the program is where it is, and Coach Wes coming in town and bringing some new life to the program.
Yeah, I'm also kind of curious about this. For a lot of these baseball players, they do what you would do in your football career, which is, man, you got to go to bed thinking about this one last night. You got a long time to think about this here today. I do think, and I mentioned this a moment ago, I think you and I have talked about this before too, football and baseball are also just very different sports. Like, when you get into football, you're colliding with another man on every play, so the nerves stop creeping in after a while, and you're just sort of in a physical fight for your life, and that kind of takes your mind off of anything else. Baseball gives you a lot to think about. It moves at a pace that requires you to recognize the magnitude of every moment. It's one of the reasons why some of us like the sport so much. So put yourself in the position of guys who played a different sport than you were famous for playing. What do you think it's like to go to bed last night, to wake up this morning, long wait to kind of show up at the ballpark here? I don't think the butterflies probably describes the feeling inside the skin of players on both these teams, frankly.
Yeah, it can certainly be a drain. I mean, you just have such adrenaline getting ready for the moment, and baseball can be so technical. It's different than, you give a defensive lineman enough energy and juice, it doesn't matter about technique. Well, let me just tell you, when you're at the plate, your technique matters. And, you're thinking about scheme and even in the field. So that passion, that energy can sometimes be a negative. And, let's say that might have played a part in Saturday's performance. So I think having that out of the way almost helps this Georgia team and in recognition of, hey, we've got to play within ourselves. We've got to play the same style baseball that has led us to this point, and then feed into some of that energy when it's healthy, because Foley Field has certainly provided one of the best college atmospheres in the baseball landscape this season.
It certainly has, and we'll do more on baseball before we're done on the program today. But, John, I want to get back to sort of our more traditional topic of football here for a moment. And, Georgia got a really good commit on Sunday from Christian Garrett, four-star defensive lineman from Prince Avenue. I think Elias Williams, the five-star tight end, his decision to kind of shut down his recruitment is a pretty big deal. And the point that I made before you came on, John, is that you've got Zayden Walker, who committed last week, Williams, who kind of, I guess, reaffirmed his pledge, maybe you'll say it that way, Christian Garrett, who commits on Sunday. The similar theme from all of these guys is we're done. We're shutting it down. We're not listening to any more offers, and these days they are offers. We're not listening to any more offers from anybody else. And to me, that really says something. It says something about the quality of the official visit weekends that Georgia's put together the last 2 weeks, the effectiveness of the pitch coming out of these weekends on behalf of Georgia, and also what looks to me to be a little bit of a scorched earth style of recruiting of not only are we going to get commitments, but we're going to get the kind of commitments that don't leave the door open for anybody else, assuming that these statements that are being made right now prove to be true. Like, that's a pretty big thing for Georgia to be pulling off. And right now, it sort of looks as if that's what Georgia's doing.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to the bigger picture of Georgia football, because there's no detail that is overlooked in that program. And Coach Smart is compensated well, and I think it's compensated duly. You look at the attention that he puts on literally every aspect of Georgia football, and this is a reflection these past few weeks, this month of June, where you see the recruiting official visits, you see the commitment from the players. It continues to be the cupbearer and the standard bearer across the country. Every other team is trying to figure out how to do it like Georgia does, because Coach Smart and that entire program, that entire department, has prioritized the recruitment, the home feel, the welcoming atmosphere, the opportunity for a bigger platform and stage for these guys that are trying to say, what gives me the best opportunity to become a professional football player one day and have the great college atmosphere and education for some, and an opportunity to win national championships. And that's what Georgia continues to push to these players, and it resonates. And it certainly, you have to compete in the NIL world. Georgia continues to do that. But there's others that are trying to buy their way into relevance, and Georgia doesn't have to do it. Georgia's doing it the way of, we're going to provide you the best atmosphere. We're going to provide you a competitive environment and a place for you, if you're willing to put in the work, to maximize your skill set. And I think that's what every player is and student athletes looking for when they're trying to evaluate where they should spend their next 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, I'd make the comparison here just to give people more context as to why I think this is a big deal. USC, which has tried to be a little bit of a thorn in Georgia's side, it flipped Justice Terry, got his commitment, the outstanding defensive lineman. It got Isaiah Gibson's commitment. That's a guy that Georgia has viewed as a major target. And yet, a long way to go, of course, in both these recruitments. But the point is that in the immediate aftermath of Terry and Gibson committing to USC, they were still spending as much time around Georgia as they ever were, and Gibson's been very open about the push from Georgia. I think that, certainly Terry has made no secret, too, that he is still strongly considering UGA. He seemed to have a great official visit, both he and Gibson both, last weekend to Georgia. The point is that, USC was capable of, it's almost like the old Seinfeld bit about you can take the reservation, but you can't hold the reservation. Like, like you can take the commitment, but can you hold the commitment? And I think in Georgia's case, not only are they taking the commitment here, but they're also, kind of, I guess, sort of reminding people about what the definition of the word commitment actually is.
Yeah, and let's call it what it is. USC has done a good job of recruiting our state. I mean, they've come in and tried to cherry pick, and NIL is certainly a factor. Lincoln is certainly a factor, but they're still always going to compete against, one, what's become a national brand, and two, that hometown opportunity that they can't rival. And with that second piece of familiarity, that sometimes has been a little bit of a curse for some of these players. Are going, I've gone to so many Georgia events. I've been to Athens so many times that maybe I want a little something different. And then for other players, they're saying it feels like home, it feels like family. So I think that it's an individual experience in their take, but obviously Georgia continues to not only recruit across the country some of the best players, but as we all know, Georgia is one of the hotbeds of supreme talent. And we continue to battle in those places to keep in-state talent in-state.
All right, in the time we have left, I want to talk about something that I probably haven't talked about enough because it happened while I was gone, but a couple of interesting notes popped up on the 2024 Georgia schedule the other day, and as I said before, I just wasn't here, and so we probably haven't done as much of this as we possibly could. What did you make, if you had a chance to pay attention to much of this, to start with, the kind of backlash from Auburn people about the fact that Auburn is Georgia's homecoming game for 2024? I think this is probably more of a I think the days of homecoming being your game against William and Mary or something like that, I think a lot of that's kind of passé at this point because, honestly, you're doing whatever TV wants you to do, and so, therefore, the games are whatever they are. I don't think the traditional homecoming thing's quite what it once was, but it's also a little bit poetic just given the dominance that Georgia's had over Auburn in recent years there as well. Auburn people aren't too happy about being Georgia's homecoming opponent. What did you make of that?
I love it, is what I make of it. I love the fact that Auburn has become a basketball school.
Yes.
And for all the Auburn fans out there that are just trying to hold on to history, they have to realize that they are no longer that force that they used to be. And yeah, I agree. TV drives almost all of the decisions that are made. It's about marketability and what fits for fans. And what can draw big numbers, because this is a money-making endeavor across the board. I think we've seen that reflected more and more for all of us in all aspects of the game. So, for Auburn, they may get their feelings hurt, but I think the recent history shows they belong as the homecoming opponent. I mean, they have not been that force that we certainly knew them to be years ago. And it's kind of reflected. As you look at the overall schedule, I was more disappointed in the noon games. I was expecting, with the change from CBS and that 3:30 game, that's a transition for all of us. But seeing some of those more marquee games at the noon slot can't be real exciting for not only the players but also the fans.
Yeah, and then that's a good point. And then the other, thing that came up, and this is not going to be a noon game, going to be a primetime game at a different night than we're used to. Georgia and Georgia Tech on Black Friday. When this happened while we were on vacation, the reaction from people that I know was just frantic, because that's obviously cutting into a very big high school football weekend in Georgia. We have since learned that they're going to kind of postpone that and move that to the different week to accommodate this game being there on that Friday night, because it's one of the bigger weeks of the playoff year in terms of the sheer number of really good games that go on. It's also a little bit of a new chapter. I mean, we've seen Georgia and Georgia Tech play weird game times before, going back to, I guess, when your brother was maybe playing there. We saw some kind of weird sort of games for the Georgia Tech rivalry in terms of when they were played, but a little bit of a different chapter here. The game is at night, and it's on Black Friday night as opposed to that Saturday afternoon thing we've sort of come to expect here from this. Any reaction to you from that on any of those fronts?
Yeah, I kind of like it. I think that this game, if we're going to continue to hold on to it, and I hope that we do, I think, that in-state game does matter for a lot of people, and just the nostalgia of it. It's not the competition that it has been in the past. And we all can recognize that, but see that there's still value in playing that game. I think having it on a Friday night, it adds a unique experience and atmosphere all the way around. I was grateful to hear, as you told me just now, that they moved some of the high school games around. That was my biggest concern, just because that time of year is in Georgia football, high school on a Friday night matters. And so I'm grateful that those aren't going to be in conflict. But I think it could make for a pretty unique atmosphere at a time in not only history, but time of year where that game may not have that same ability to draw the energy that it might otherwise need. And so you put it on a special night at a special time, make it a little more unique, and hopefully you can get that energy in the game that might otherwise slip away when you look at one team that's competing for national championships on another on an annual basis, and another program that I think their bar is set a little bit different. So I think it should be exciting for everybody.
John, great stuff as always. We certainly appreciate that here on DawgNation Daily here today. We'll look forward to speaking with you again very soon. Hope you enjoy the baseball tonight. Maybe the next time we get together, we're talking about the Georgia Bulldogs finding their way to Omaha for the College World Series. What a thing that would be. Appreciate your time, John.
Hey, can't wait. Go Dogs.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, really fun stuff there. And speaking of fun, when it comes to Georgia and its baseball team tonight, we'll talk to Cody Chaffins more about that in a moment. Kind of setting the scene for what will go down there with the Diamond Dawgs later on. Prior to that, though, let's get ready to go cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Of course, right now we're excited about Georgia baseball, but for me, that's not the only thing I have to be excited about here this summer. Obviously, coming up the month of July, getting a chance to be among the first to set sail on Utopia of the Seas. Now, I don't say that to brag about me because ultimately this show is about you, but I would encourage you when you're thinking about what you have a chance to enjoy right now, Utopia of the Seas and the debut of that cruise ship, one of the things for you to consider, because keep in mind here, every one of those Utopia of the Sea sailings is going to be going to Perfect Day Coco Cay. And you know what that is by now. It's the private island oasis right there in Bahamas. It's the only way you can get there is on a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. It's exclusive for those that are on a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. And there isn't a private destination anywhere in this space anything like Perfect Day Coco Cay. Plenty of imitators, but nothing rivals what Perfect Day Coco Cay is all about, especially when you think about the debut of Hideaway Beach, the adults-only enclave. That's obviously a big part of that. Just a wonderful experience. And all of those itineraries on Utopia of the Seas, they're all going to be going to Perfect Day Coco Cay. So enjoy that. Also, all kinds of fun on board Utopia of the Seas there, too. The stuff they're doing, kind of pushing the envelope in terms of the flow riders and the water slides and things like that. Just the fun and entertainment to enjoy, the action to enjoy while you're on board is just going to be outstanding. So Jessica Slater is a wonderful travel agent. She can tell you all about it. You can give her a call, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can also email her, jslater@dreamvacations.com. And who knows, I bet Jess could help you plan a trip to Omaha if you need to do that there as well. I'm sure, I don't know how many vacations she's booked to Omaha, Nebraska in her day, but if there's one to be booked, I bet Jessica could probably help you out there as well. Although I will tell you that Royal Caribbean does not sail to Omaha. I will tell you that. All right, so speaking of the College World Series, Georgia's hoping to get there. The rest of the field is set. I liked what Avent, the NC State coach, had to say about the fact that tonight sort of a standalone game for college baseball. Now, listen, in a very busy, crowded sports landscape where you've got, NBA finals, Stanley Cup finals, Major League Baseball, things like that, Caitlin Clark controversy of the day, college baseball is still sort of having to fight for its spot at the table. So that's the reality of the situation. But I do think this sport having kind of a standalone game for the final spot in the College World Series, I think that Avent's right when he says that should be a lot of fun for the sport. As far as the rest of the teams in there, you got Tennessee, who needed all 3 games but did finally beat Evansville. Florida State got there, against UConn. Virginia's there, North Carolina's there. So, as we have said a little earlier, it's all either SEC or ACC in the College World Series here right now. Kentucky, who has just been a wagon all year long, they eliminated Oregon State in 2 games. And by the way, the sort of asterisk to that is, in eliminating Oregon State, that's also now the official end. I believe I'm right about this. That's the end of the Pac-12 as a league as we've known it. The Oregon State losing Kentucky is the final Pac-12 athletic event ever. And I think the game ended. I think I have this right. Runner on second, wild pitch. Kentucky scored on a wild pitch from second base to win the game, which is about as Pac-12 as it gets. So that was the end for the Pac-12 as a league. Kentucky on its way to the College World Series. Florida, and listen, we don't give Florida credit very, very much, but Florida had to, play well against Georgia in the regular season to make the make the NCAA tournament. Had to fight its way through a regional. Had to go to Monday to win the regional. Then a tough super regional on the road at Clemson, and Florida emerges there to go to the College World Series. So Jack Caglione and the Gators getting to Omaha. We try to be as objective as we can, even when our biases are obvious. But that's a pretty good run into a College World Series for Florida when their back was against the wall at one point in time. Texas A&M on its way there as well. So it's either Georgia or NC State tonight, the final spot when it comes to all of that. A couple of other notes here. Former Georgia running back recruit target, John Emery Jr. was in the transfer portal, but Emery Jr. has announced his plans to remain at LSU. This is a guy who, I'm not, in any way picking on Emery on this, but, his college career probably has not worked out as well as he liked. He's only got like about 1,000 career yards rushing. Probably has not worked out quite as well as he would like, but has a chance, what we think could still be a pretty good LSU offense to have some success here this year. So Emery Jr. remaining at LSU. He is not going to transfer. Someone else who apparently is not transferring either is Prentice Air Noland. You'll remember Noland as the quarterback from Langston Hughes and a guy who was incredibly prolific during his high school career. We're getting a little bit of sound coming in from that Brian Kelly video, but incredibly prolific during his high school career there at Hughes, goes to Ohio State. There had been some rumors coming out that he was homesick, and I guess his father has confirmed that he was homesick, but not the kind of homesick that caused you want to leave school, just the kind of homesick he's just homesick. And listen, I was homesick sometimes too at that age, so I sort of get some of that. What's going to be interesting for Ohio State is they have a very, very crowded quarterback situation. We've said before, it's not obvious who their starter for this upcoming year is going to be, although I guess Will Howard's going to get the first crack at that. But can he hold on to that job with Devin Brown having been there for a long time and with Julian Sayin earning some attention? And it's really the presence of Sayin that may ultimately cause some problems here for Noland. Two guys, same age, basically, same level of eligibility remaining. These are guys that are going to be competing alongside each other. And if you're Noland, I guess perhaps you wonder, for a late ad like this, okay, what does that mean for me that you bring in Julian Sayin? Ohio State's got a lot of quarterbacks in place right now, and there are at least some whispers that Noland may be not too happy up there at the moment, but we'll see if that remains true, and we will make that cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Of course, a lot of fun expected to be had tonight. Foley Field for the incredible finale of this super regional as Georgia gets ready to take on NC State. A guy who's been there this weekend and really been around the Diamond Dawgs a lot this year is our buddy Cody Chaffins. We'll bring Cody in here right now. And Cody, let me just say this. First of all, it's great to have you in the program. We appreciate the work you do on the show every day, but also around stuff like this that you've been covering for DawgNation. I talked about the Georgia pitching situation a little earlier, and obviously this is not the sort of traditional, like, you got the big Friday night frontline guy like a Hancock would have been or a Wilcox could have been a couple of years ago, where you sort of know you're going to always be in great hands. But at the same time, I don't want to gloss over what Leighton Finley did yesterday. Relatively young guy at a time in which Georgia had to have a big performance. Finley came out and gave Georgia a massive, massive game on the mound with the season on the line. So most of the conversation around Georgia takes place, what happens with the bats. But what Finley did on the mound yesterday, essentially, announcing that Georgia planned on getting to Monday with his presence there on the bump, that was a very big deal for Georgia yesterday. I want to make sure we give him proper credit.
Yeah, it was huge. He's your Friday night starter typically on SEC weekends, and you see why. He shut out innings, I think, through 7 yesterday, and I was listening to the NC State players after the game, what they were talking about in the post-game press conference. They said, we were waiting on him to make a mistake, and he never made a mistake. So, yeah, shout out to Leighton Finley for getting those, of course, getting run support helps, but having him in game 2, and I'm not sure, we didn't hear from Wes Johnson why it was Colton Smith in game 1 and Leighton Finley, but it was so good to have Leighton Finley in game 2 because he was the guy they needed, kind of the stopper, the ace, what you needed right there to keep the season alive.
And obviously, with the bats, we know the season that Charlie Condon has had, and you mentioned, other guys there as well. But, if it comes down to it, if there's a big at-bat to be had in this game tonight, I probably feel about as good as Trey Phelps coming to the plate as I do almost anybody. And listen, there are a lot of guys. Corey Collins had a great year. You can roll through all kinds of names in addition to Condon. But what Phelps seems to be able to do in big situations, man, that's a guy that, I know the idea of sort of the clutch gene in sports is kind of an overrated topic, but that is a guy who just seems to be very comfortable in the kinds of moments that nights like this sort of provide.
Yeah, he's always cool, and I'm not sure if it's because his jersey is like halfway. I actually should probably take some buttons out here.
That's right.
This is in honor of Trey Phelps.
I don't think anybody wants to see me unbutton my shirt, but yeah, Phelps has that look going. Yeah,
but Phelps is just a freshman, and that's what we have to keep in mind is, wow, what a season he's having as a freshman. He thrives on those big moments, and he thrives in celebrating the big moments when he gets back. And you could just see the swagger that comes off of him. And he loves being in those spots. It was huge yesterday. They'll expect him to be huge tonight. And, it's not one of those spots where it's too big for him. He played some, didn't play traditional high school baseball, has some great experience. And I think that probably helps to build on, he's been in big moments before in his baseball career.
So you're at the game some this weekend, and you've obviously been around this team some a little bit as of late. I guess take this wherever you want to go. Like, what have you learned from being close to this team, seeing some of what's been going on with this team? What kind of personality have you seen come up there? And, does that kind of inform any kind of, I don't want to say prediction necessarily, but does that shape your expectation for tonight based on what you've already seen?
So we go back to NCAA Regional. The first game, Finley did start, but it was against Army, and the team looked visibly nervous.
Yeah.
And maybe that was the way with game one of the Super Regional, because you've talked about, you had that second inning that was just mind-blowing. You had the first 10 batters all reach base in the inning. They had already batted around before Georgia got an out, and you did see in that game, there were some errors in the field as well. They dropped in fly balls that they probably should have caught. So I think there were some nerves there. And then in the regional, we saw them settle down against UNC Wilmington and then just scrap it out against Georgia Tech. So you had the settle down day yesterday against NC State. So it's tonight to scrap it out. You saw Zach Harris pitch 6 innings in that game against Georgia Tech on the Monday it was. And so, or Sunday it was, sorry. And now it's Monday, and we'll probably see him again. But, Wes Johnson said everybody's available except for Leighton Finley to come out of the bullpen, as it's kind of all hands on deck as you try and make it to Omaha.
So to finish out here, 7 o'clock ESPN. You don't get a bigger stage than this. Obviously, Georgia fans, I think, are going to do their part to put on a show. I think the team itself is going to do its part to kind of put on a show there as well. Kudzu Hill's going to be rocking. Left Field Lounge is going to be like the atmosphere outside the stadium is going to be just as crazy as the atmosphere inside the stadium, I think. And I think it's a really good commercial for college baseball, but a really good chance for these Georgia fans. And so many of them have been so loyal to this team, in recent years when things obviously haven't been going quite as well. And by the way, you did a great job, kind of looking at some of the Kudzu Lounge stuff the other day. People should go see that at our DawgNation YouTube page. We're seeing some of the stuff from that here right now. There are a lot of longtime Georgia baseball fans who've been waiting for a moment like this. And at least until you get to Omaha, it does not get any bigger than what tonight's backdrop is going to provide.
No, under the lights at Foley Field is going to be awesome. As you said, I was out on Kudzu Hill. And here's what's so impressive. I heard from multiple sources there that it was Josh Brooks. The AD came out to cut trees down to make the view from the greenhouse better, to make from the pasture porch. He did tree work for everybody so that the folks on Kudzu Hill can be a part and impact the game. And it was crazy out there on Saturday. Now, I wasn't out there when the 11 runs happened in the second inning or whatever it ended up being, but it's going to be crazy up there tonight. A lot of the students I was talking to during that piece said, hey, we came back. We were back home. We came back for this. And so you better believe they're going to be there tonight. And they got a lot of time. There was a lot of liquid encouragement up there on Kudzu Hill. I got to believe that'll be flowing again tonight as well.
Cody, thanks so much for your time. Certainly appreciate that. Going to be a fun one. And obviously, hopefully we'll get a chance to connect later on about a Georgia win. And moving on to the College World Series there in Omaha. Great stuff, Cody. Certainly appreciate all of that.
Going to be a fun.
So speaking of the Diamond Dawgs, in honor of that, we'll show you this for our golden shoe here, our first one to give out here today. There was a little bit of frustration from some Georgia fans yesterday because in the immediate aftermath of the win, TV people waited a very long time to announce what the game time was going to be. And so we had our buddy Father Pat on social media here really trying to make the case for that game to be at 7 p.m. In fact, showing off the sign there at Kudzu Hill that says, we want 7 p.m. with an acronym underneath that I'm not going to say very much about. But nonetheless, Condon's Kudzu Kegs, they get their wish. It's going to be 7 p.m. tonight, and it is not going to be for the faint of heart. It is going to be a rowdy, raucous atmosphere and a ton of fun. So everybody be careful and have some fun with that. Another golden shoe to give out here there as well, going our way to Johnny Surf Dog. Johnny is a great part of our audience on a regular basis, one of our regular commenters, and he had a tremendous weekend of his own here this weekend. If you're watching a video, you see a nice photo of him there on the left. On the right, Johnny letting us know that he swam around the island of Key West. Can you imagine that? He swam 12 and a half miles or 20 kilometers. For those of you who like the metric system, which in swimming is considered a double marathon. He said, I trained 6 months, took me 7.5 hours of swimming. Go Dogs. That is as significant of an accomplishment as anybody's going to ever do from a physical standpoint. Amazing stuff from Johnny. He's a great commenter. He's a terrific dog fan and a very accomplished swimmer there as well. He deserves a lot of credit for all of that. Johnny, congratulations. What a beautiful place to be participating in something like that going around the island of Key West. So congratulations to you. A well-earned golden shoe coming your way on all of that there as well. Lousy, stinking Gators, they may be on their way to Omaha, but it's Jacksonville that causes them some trouble because that's where dogs reign. It's been 1,311 days since Florida's beaten Georgia in football. We think that continues, and that is our Gator Hater Updater. Y'all enjoy the game tonight. We'll come back. We'll talk about it, and who knows? We might even talk about it later on tonight. So we'll see you then. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, when you turn 2 for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs, they show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. That is what our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia are all. That's a foul. Getting our sponsors mixed up. R.S. Andrews is all about. Pella Window and Door Georgia is great too. R.S. Andrews, completely different company, providing a completely different service, and I kind of got them conflated there for a moment, so I apologize for that. All right, I am going to start on YouTube here today. We'll see what's on everybody's mind, and we will roll through all of this. Let us see. All right, comments over here. Mike saying good job to Johnny. Yeah, he deserves some good job, and I bet Johnny's still in here right now. He's oftentimes is. In fact, he's in YouTube sometimes too, so you may see that. Foster Moss says, if Georgia wins tonight, will you be broadcasting live from Omaha during the College World Series? So, total confession. One of the things I don't do a ton is I don't talk a ton about like the stuff that's happening in my life on a regular basis, just because I try to make Georgia football the star of the show. I've never really thought of myself as the star of the show. So I don't come in here and let me tell you what's going on in my life. I don't do a ton of that. But let me tell you what's going on in my life. We have so many things right now that my son is pestering me to death because he wants to go. Like, he has been talking about this on a regular basis. If I did go, I'd be going as like a ticketed fan because I think the credential process on this is long since sailed. But I don't know if I can go. I just don't know. I would desperately want to go, but I just don't know that I can. I mean, I won't get into all the details. Like, it's insane. Like, right now, our life is insane, just insane. I can't think of the last conversation my wife and I had that wasn't about like the next thing we're about to have to do. It's just one of those deals. It's just sometimes life just throws you a big series of events. We got a big series of events going on. So long story short, I don't know that I can go to Omaha, but if I did go, I wouldn't be able to stay the entire time. I wouldn't be able to do that. Go up there and at least sort of say you saw it. I doubt. I mean, honestly, I just doubt that I could. But my son is dying to go. My daughter could care less. My son is dying to go. Frank Patterson says, which commit are you more excited about, the 4-star defensive lineman or Big O Jr.? I do like you call him Big O Jr. That's very funny. So my point about Elias Williams is this. I don't think people have properly appreciated what a superhero this guy is. I just think that he is in the mold of like the sort of super freak among super freaks that sometimes Georgia brings in. I think that Williams is going to be comparable, I guess the educated people say, comparable to any of those. And I just don't think he's properly gotten that appreciation yet. Like, this is a guy who is probably a little more, in the eyes of a lot of the recruiting world, a little bit more accomplished as a pass catcher at the moment, like a true, kind of athlete catching the football. But I mean, I had high school coaches telling me last year that, Camden County kind of went on a little bit of a run in the postseason. He was, because this is Jeff Herron wing T. People are telling me that Williams was mauling people in the running game, mauling people. And I think he's coming to Georgia to catch the football, of course. Everybody sort of seems to want to. But this is also a guy that can be that sort of blocker for you, too. I mean, this is a big-time player. But Christian Garrett's also a really big deal there as well, because you want to hoard as many defensive linemen as you can possibly get. That's Georgia's unfair advantage. Georgia's unfair advantage is the fact that it's got the lines of scrimmage on lock. Defensive line right now, we're talking about with Garrett. So they're both, I think, really big deals. Spencer Clark says, are you going to be going to SEC Media Days? No, once again, not to make this all about me and my life, but We're going to do something a little different this year for SEC Media Days for, reasons that are a little bit hard for me to explain, at least right now. So DawgNation's going to have a bunch of SEC Media Days coverage. It may include a little bit less of me this year, though. By the way, Texas Dog isn't here. He had a funny comment the other day. This is right as our show went off the air. I saw this. So Texas Dog has lived in Texas. He's been to visit us at UGA Bookstore before coming to a game in Athens. But he said he'd been waiting his whole life, or however long he's lived there, been waiting however many years for Georgia to come play in Texas. And he says now that they're doing that this year, he says he's moving back to Georgia, which I thought was kind of funny. I saw that. Jonathan Aaron says, I'd like to wish the Hawkinsville 10U All-Star baseball team good luck this week in the district tournament. Absolutely, to the folks there in Hawkinsville. Best of luck there on that. This is that time of year. A lot of those all-star tournaments taking place, and everybody's having a lot of fun there with that. I love this time of year for that reason. Baseball is just a really fun sport. It's just a really fun sport, and just a really, really good thing. So, yeah, best of luck there for sure. And a lot of folks who are doing that right now. We spent a lot of time at the ball field this weekend for sure. Brandon Griffin says he's driving down to Austin from Colorado for the Georgia-Texas game this year. Brandon, we'd love to see you. That's awesome to hear. Alan Hampton says you should take your son to watch the Dogs in the College World Series Championship game. I kind of like that. That'd be good. He's also one of the, he'd love nothing more than to go to one of those, day one sessions where there's just, 4 games and just watch every single one of them. He'd watch 20 hours of baseball if I'd let him. So we'd love to be there, obviously, for the championship finale. But if he could be there for, a day one session and just see everybody, he'd watch every single one of those games. He'd watch every single one if I'd let him. Yeah, Texas Dog said, I've been here for 35 years, and Georgia's never played a football game in this state. It's really funny. Texas is actually, I don't want to say one of the few states, but, I think I've been to more states than not. I've never been to Texas before, and perhaps Georgia never playing there is the reason why. So this year in Austin will be my first time going to Texas. If I did at one point in time really want to go to SEC Media Days because it's in Dallas this year. I want to go to Dealey Plaza. I'm not going to get into the Kennedy assassination thing right now, but I am fascinated by the Kennedy assassination. And I want to go to Dealey Plaza and just do my own investigation. I've never been able to do that, but I want to do that at some point in time. Maybe one of these days. Sometimes I have very bad ideas. One of the very, very, very bad ideas I've had is if we sort of started a separate podcast feed, sort of a reoccurring thing where we talked about stuff that has nothing to do with anything like this. Do a Kennedy assassination podcast or something like that. I think I'd be in on that. Bill Sanders and Barry Watkins complaining about me starting on YouTube. I apologize, guys. Let's see what else. Gary Holt says, it sounds like BA needs a boat ride to unwind. Yeah, nothing bad is going on. It's just a lot going on. And one of these days, I guess I'll, like I said, nothing bad. It's nothing that, other people don't deal with too. It just sort of happens to be, kind of all happening here sort of at once. But it's, we're very happy. Even when life is busy, I think life is still really, really good. We just sort of roll from one thing to the next. A lot of times I've always really liked summer because summer is, summer typically moves at a pace that I really, really like. That's one of the reasons why, I love college football, but I never wish the summer away. I like, kind of summertime vibes. There's a little bit less traffic. We're a little bit more relaxed. You go sneak off, play some golf, sneak off, go to the pool. Some of y'all are big into the lake. I just love the cadence of summer. We don't quite have that this year, which is fine. Tennille Calvino correcting, Like I said, I'm not getting into these acronyms, but y'all know what some of those are. Tennille gave us a slight change to the one acronym we just saw a moment ago, saying that it should conclude with DD, standing for Diamond Dawgs, HBTMFDD. I'll let you figure all that out. So pretty funny. Tennille, very funny. Zach Adams says we're going to have a watch party tonight. It would be a great time to do one. I mean, honestly, Georgia does not want me to say this, I'm sure, but I'll say it anyway. Because it just creates a logistics problem for them. If you've got the streaming app on your phone, which is fairly easy to pull up, just go to the parking lot. Just watch that thing from the parking lot. That'd be so much fun. There's nowhere to park, unfortunately. Like, you'd have to park in Watkinsville. But if you want to have that, I mean, trust me, like, you got the adults in left field, you got the young folks in right field. They don't want to go to the game. Like, they're happy where they are. And so, or at least they don't want to be inside the stadium. They want to watch the game from where they're watching it from, for reasons I'm sure you can probably figure out. So, I mean, if you want to just go, sort of linger, there'll be something going on. As I said before, I don't think Georgia wants me to encourage people to just come hang out in the parking lot, but there are going to be no shortage of people doing that. Let us see what else. Bill Sanders says Kudzu, he'll be regardless. We're rocking regardless of the game time. I'm certainly sure. We go to DawgNation.com here for a little bit. See what they got going on. Johnny Surf Dog says they flew the dog flag there in the safety kayak, meaning while he was swimming. This is our golden shoe winner from earlier, which is an awesome thing to consider. Sort of that picture's a cool thing to think about in our mind, Johnny. That's great. And once again, truly, sincerely, congratulations for an incredible accomplishment. Incredible accomplishment. Like, I mean, I got to imagine in terms of the overall health score, the ability to swim, 13 ocean miles is probably about as strong a statement about your overall health quality as almost anything could possibly be. I'm guessing anyway. Shane Holiday says, we've been at Foley Field all weekend. There was plenty of tailgating going on. Yeah, no doubt about that. Shane Holiday says there were people lined up outside the fence watching. Yeah. So it's almost like the old school, like sort of Norman Rockwell thing where like you see the picture. I don't know if this is truly Norman Rockwell, but you know the picture I'm talking about, where like people kind of peering through the hole in the outfield wall. I mean, there are a couple of places in Foley Field area where you can see some of the field if you're not in it. Now, I don't think there's anywhere you can see the whole thing, but there are definitely some spots where you can see some of it. And like I said, if you've got an app to kind of follow along with, whether it be the video stream or Jeff and Dave who do a great job on the radio call. And honestly, I've probably listened to them as much as I've streamed the video when I've been out and about lately, because I think they do a really good job. And I think that baseball just is a sport that sort of works with the audio, especially if you're driving, of course, because we're all about being safe while you're driving. Randy Hall, I did see this. Zaire Addison, who we've talked about before, committed to Oregon. So big get there for Dan Lanning, who keeps on winning. Stays winning, I believe is the way you say that these days. Let us see what else. Andrew Sisson says making my kid's dream come true should be a top priority. Listen, Andrew, I totally agree with that. However, and I say this with all loving kindness, I've made so many of their dreams come true. The idea that that they, like, this is the one. Like, if we can get there, obviously we'd try to. And I've looked at it before. From here, there's a way to drive to Omaha that would take you through St. Louis and take you through Kansas City. You could do at least 2 major league parks on your way to Omaha. Like, there's a way to have an ultimate baseball experience on your way to Omaha. You could really do that if you did it right. So I've looked into it before. But I just don't know if we're going to do that right now. DT says, because obviously the accommodations are not very easy right now. DT using one of my lines says he knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who could hook it up with a hotel room. Perhaps that's the case. Perhaps that's the case. Let us see what else is going on here. DT was enjoying Jon Stinchcomb's enjoyment of Auburn being mad about the homecoming thing. That's one of those things where had I been here that week, we probably would have had a lot more fun with that. I wanted to mention that to John today just because we hadn't really talked about that too much. Let's see what else. Scott Harris says, I worked for a client in Omaha for about 6 months during the College World Series. There wasn't a hotel within 100 miles of Omaha. Yeah, I don't doubt that's true. Don't doubt that's true. Let us see what else. Scott Harris also looking forward to the game tonight. Yeah, that's a lot of fun. Let me go back to, let's take one more spin around the comments here. Back to YouTube first. Frank Patterson says, I mentioned Norman Rockwell a moment ago. He says, I'm more of a poker table full of dogs type art guy, which is, listen, dogs play in poker. It doesn't get any classier than that. Does not get any classier than that. Jonathan Aaron says, am I the second shooter on the grassy knoll? Here's all I'm going to tell you. And I'm literally not going to say any more than this. Like my whole opinion of the Kennedy thing has changed so much in the last, let's say, 15 years. From where I was 15 years ago, and then I kind of changed a little bit about 5 years later. I've changed a good bit in the last, like, say, 10 years. It's always been a subject I've been fascinated by. It's just a fascinating subject. I mean, it just is. I mean, it is just endlessly interesting to me. I'd say I've changed a good bit on this in recent years, and I'm not going to say any more about it than that. Lance D says, Dealey Plaza is well worth it. The school, book depository, museum, great history lesson. Yeah, I mean, I truly would just love to see it. And, like, I'm kind of I'm not really smart enough to be a nerd, but I am a little bit of a geek. And the fact that if I go to places like that, I'm always looking to, like, just sort of geek out on some of those type of things. I just do. I've always liked stuff like that. I like this from George on Tap. He says the greenhouse is the baseball version of the tracks. The old Irk Russell thing about the track people, the railroad track people. I think that's a great analogy. George on Tab, you're always great, and I think that's a great analogy. A great, great analogy. That's really good comparison. Let us see where else. George and Tap also encouraging people to like the show. I appreciate that. Yeah, I don't ask for stuff like that very much. I probably should ask more. But when you do like the show, it does do us some favors. So I appreciate that. I try not to beat you all over the head with stuff like that. And maybe I should do more of it. It's like my kids watch all these YouTubers, and they're always just every 5 seconds. So like and subscribe. Yeah, we probably don't do enough of that around here, but if you would, you clearly are helping us. Spencer Clark says a geek is similar to a nerd, just more common sense. Yeah, I think I sort of think of it as a geek has like an intense fascination. A nerd has a high level of knowledge. Like I'm interested enough in like sort of non-cool things to be geeky, but I'm not smart enough to be nerdy. But maybe I do have a little bit more common sense. No. Kaylee Manziel popped in to say she wants to hear more about the Kennedy theory. As I said before, one of these days we may do like DawgNation After Dark, and we may get into all this stuff. And who knows, if you ever corner me on a World Caribbean cruise ship, you may hear all kinds of stuff that you don't hear on the air. But we ain't doing that today. We're not doing that today. One of these days, though, maybe. Like I said before, sort of a separate feed. I am always and forever committed, keeping this free show. Maybe one of these days we'll do like a subscription type deal for like the really like sort of it's like just simply from the standpoint of almost like the bouncer at the door. Like if you came here, then we're going to give it all to you. Maybe one of these days we'll do that. It'll be my version of it, like a Substack. So it'll be like our audio version of a Substack one day, maybe. We'll do Kennedy assassination, and we'll do some of these other things. Texas Dog says there's a museum there in Dealey Plaza at the Book Depository. Texas Dog, that's fascinating. I'd love to see that. Love to see that. I'd also like to see all of those like opening shots, and I guess a lot of these are gone now, from like, remember the old Dallas show? Like when I was a kid, shows had great theme songs. I don't know that shows still have the great theme songs. Like we'd watch Dukes of Hazzard, and then like when Dukes of Hazzard was over, Dallas would come on. The adult subject matter was kind of over my head a little bit. But man, when that theme song was cranking up, they're showing Texas Stadium and all the cool Texas Oil Man stuff. I used to love that. Love that. So Mr. Y says, I love baseball, but I'm new to the college game because of UGA. How does the College World Series format work? How are there so many teams in it? Is it a round-robin type of deal? So it's an 8-team double elimination tournament. So if you've ever played like somebody mentioned before, like playing an all-star tournament, this is kind of all-star tournaments work too. So it's like 8-team double elimination. So when you lose, you drop down to the loser's bracket. And so as long as you stay winning, then you're staying up there in the winner's bracket, and eventually there'll only be one team left in the winner's bracket, and then maybe there's nobody left in the winner's bracket. But then after that, you drop down into the loser's bracket. And so when you're in the loser's bracket, you're kind of having to fight your way to sort of stay alive. And once you get back to – this is a change. When Georgia won it in 1990, this is not the way it worked. That's obviously now a million years ago. But back then, there was no World Series finale. So Georgia – in the College World Series final, just beat Oklahoma State in one game. But when Georgia played in the College World Series final in 2008, that was a 3-game series. So it's the same thing here, where it's an 8-team double elimination tournament until you get down to 2 teams, and then they play in a 3-game series. So it basically starts fresh at that point in time. So it's a double elimination tournament to get to 2 teams. And then those 2 teams will play in a 3-game series to decide the College World Series championship. So it's a little bit of a combination of what the NCAA regional was, just twice as many teams, and the super regional with 2 teams playing there at that point in time. Let us see what else. Anything else we got to go? Ulysses Dunning's checking out. We're getting ready to go too, Ulysses. Marshall Fleming says there was a guy I worked with that was in the Army, that was 18 in the Army, was in Dallas about 40 yards from Kennedy when he got shot. He saw it all. Very interesting stuff, he would say. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty fascinating. That's pretty fascinating. Well, I mean, yeah, what an interesting conversation that must be. Gerald Harmon shouting back to Who Shot JR. I remember Who Shot JR. I was a small kid, but I remember. Great cliffhanger. Probably not quite as good as, was it Bobby Ewing, played by Patrick Duffy, who died on the show, and then they signed him to a new contract, and they just pretended the whole thing had been a dream. Y'all remember that? Once again, I was a very young kid. But that's probably not quite as good a storyline as Who Shot JR. Who Shot JR was a big deal. Big deal. Let's see what else. Philip Jordan Wells says to my Oliver Stone. Now the JFK movie is amazing. Like you can decide for yourself like what part of that's true, what part of that's not. The movie itself is amazing, amazing movie. And I mean, I've seen that movie a million times. Seen it so many times. I think it's a very good movie. And there's a million superstar actors in there too. Small parts, just really well done. Combination of live footage, historic footage with, cinematic footage. Really well done. Let's see what else. All right, we're going to go. Y'all, good stuff. Enjoy the game tonight. Can't wait for it. Really, really excited. Just a really, really fun and I would say totally unexpected, pleasant surprise here for this summer. So soak it up. I literally have no idea how this is going to play out. It could be anything. It could be 20-19. It could be 2-1, and it could be anything in between on both sides. So we'll get ready to roll with it and see where it goes, and then we'll talk to you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window Door of Georgia. Also, shout out to our friends at R.S. Andrews who make the show possible, or at least the R.S. Andrews cool down possible. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. That is what R.S. Andrews is all about. So make sure you find them online, rsandrews.com. It's hot right now. Get your air conditioning unit cooled back up to factory fresh specs. You can trust R.S. Andrews on that. Find them online, rsandrews.com. They'll take care of you. If your water heater goes out, in many cases, R.S. Andrews can replace it for you the same day. So find them online, rsandrews.com. Have a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Enjoy the game tonight. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia.